I knew the exact exchange rate of my dignity. It was $22 an hour. That's what they paid me to stand in the corners of their million-dollar ballrooms, invisible, until the richest man in the room heard what they called me and decided to burn their hierarchy down. 4 hours of sleep, 2 cups of scorched break room coffee, $38 left in my checking account until Friday. This was the brutal, silent calculus playing in my head as I pinned a stray wire behind the ice sculpture. The ballroom of the Grand Hotel hummed with the ambient noise of $250 million worth of net worth circulating in tuxedos and silk gowns. I was the event coordinator. To them, I was part of the upholstery. My name is Claire. I am 28 years old and my life revolves around a 5-year-old boy named Finn, who loves dinosaurs and has a chronic ear infection that laughs at over-the-counter medication. When my ex-husband walked out 4 years ago because fatherhood was cramping his entrepreneurial spirit, I stopped believing in fairy tales. I started believing in direct deposits. I straightened up, discreetly rubbing the ache in my lower back. The charity gala was peaking. Waiters glided past with trays of champagne I couldn't afford to smell, let alone drink. Claire. The voice belonged to Richard, my boss. He was a man who wore too much cologne and possessed the empathy of a parking meter. The centerpieces on table 4 are wilting, Richard snapped, not looking at me, his eyes scanning the crowd for a wealthier mark to schmooze. Fix it, and wipe that exhausted look off your face. You look like you just crawled out of a minivan. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. Right away, Richard. I hurried toward the kitchen to grab fresh hydrangeas. As I rounded the corner by the coat check, a heavy shoulder collided with mine. The clipboard in my hand clattered to the marble floor. My apologies, a deep, quiet voice said. I knelt instantly, scrambling to gather my run-of-show documents. No, my fault. Completely my fault. I kept my head down, trained to never make the guests feel responsible. A large, decidedly masculine hand reached down and picked up the clipboard before I could. I noticed the knuckles first. They weren't the manicured, soft hands of a trust fund heir. There was a pale scar cutting across the thumb, and a faint callus on the index finger. I looked up. Samuel Pierce wasn't handsome in the fragile, polished way the other men in the room were. He was rugged, broad-shouldered, and wore his tuxedo like it was a minor inconvenience he was tolerating. He was the founder of Pierce Logistics, a shipping empire he'd built from a single rusted freighter. He was also, according to the whispers in the catering kitchen, ruthlessly efficient and utterly terrifying. He handed the clipboard back to me. His dark eyes locked onto mine. He didn't do the quick, dismissive, up-and-down scan I was used to from men in this tax bracket. He just looked directly at my face. "You're bleeding," he said. I frowned, touching my lower lip. He was right. I'd bitten it too hard when dealing with Richard. "Oh, hazard of the job." "Thank you, Mr. Pierce." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You know who I am. It's my job to know everyone in the room, sir." I clutched the clipboard to my chest, a makeshift shield. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Table 4 is having a botanical crisis." I walked away quickly. I didn't look back. Women in my position didn't play coy games with billionaires. We survived them. Later that night, the event winding down, I stood by the service elevator tallying invoices. I was bone-tired. My arches felt bruised, and my mind was already racing ahead to the morning. Wake Finn, pack the lunch, navigate the bus schedule. Richard sauntered over, a half-empty martini in his hand. He leaned heavily against the wall. "Not a bad night, Claire. Despite your complete lack of polish. I saw you bump into Pierce earlier. Try not to alienate the highest net worth in the room next time." "He bumped into me, Richard." Richard scoffed, a wet, ugly sound. "Sure. Just keep your head down. You're lucky I keep you on payroll." Not many agencies want a single mother handling high-stress events. Too much baggage. He tapped the side of his glass. Unreliable. The anger flared, hot and sharp, but I swallowed it down. I needed the dental insurance. I haven't missed a day in 2 years, Richard. Just an observation, he smirked, turning away. I closed my eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. I didn't cry. Crying cost energy I didn't have. I find reliability is entirely dependent on what a person has to lose. I gasped, my eyes flying open. Samuel Pierce was standing just inside the alcove, obscured by the shadows. He had a glass of water in his hand. He stepped into the light, his gaze fixed on the spot where Richard had just been standing. "How long have you been standing there?" I asked, suddenly acutely aware of my scuffed flats and the fraying hem of my black skirt. "Long enough," Samuel said. He turned to me. "What is your name?" "Claire Adams." He nodded slowly, pulling a sleek black card from his jacket pocket. He held it out. "I'm hosting a private summit for my board of directors next month. 3 days. Very quiet, very high stakes. I want you to coordinate it." I stared at the card. "You should call my agency. Richard handles all the account bookings." "I don't want Richard," Samuel said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a terrifying authority. "I want the woman who didn't flinch when I dropped my clipboard, who knows the room better than the guests, and who handles insults with more grace than the man delivering them. Call the number, Claire." He didn't wait for an answer. He placed the card on top of my stack of invoices and walked away. I stared at the heavy cardstock. It felt like a live wire. The Pierce Logistics Summit was a logistical nightmare, and I loved every second of it. For 3 weeks, I circumvented Richard entirely. He tried to insert himself into the planning meetings, but Samuel's executive assistant politely and firmly barred him from the boardroom. It meant I was pulling double duty, my regular agency work during the day, and planning Samuel's summit at night after Finn finally went to sleep. My kitchen table became a war room of fabric swatches, catering menus, and security protocols. One Tuesday afternoon, I had to drop off some finalized schematics at the Pierce Logistics headquarters. It was a towering structure of glass and steel. I felt like an imposter stepping into the private elevator. Clutching my battered leather portfolio, I was escorted into Samuel's office. It wasn't flashy. No modern art or absurdly expensive furniture. It was practical, dominated by a massive oak desk and panoramic windows overlooking the shipping port. Samuel was on the phone when I walked in, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up over thick forearms. He signaled for me to sit. As I laid out the schematics, my cell phone buzzed. I silenced it immediately. Professional suicide to take a call in a client meeting. It buzzed again and again. I glanced at the screen. Finn's daycare. My stomach dropped into my shoes. I declined it, but a text immediately popped up. "Finn has a fever of 102. You need to come get him now." Samuel ended his call. "Let's look at the seating chart for Friday's dinner," he said, leaning over the desk. "I want the union reps separated from the—" He stopped. He was looking at my hands. They were shaking. I dragged my eyes up to meet his. "Mr. Pierce, I am so sorry. There's an emergency." His expression didn't change, but his posture shifted, becoming instantly alert. "What kind of emergency?" "My son." The words tasted like ash. I knew the script. This was the part where the corporate client realized I was a liability. The part where the baggage became a problem. "He's sick. I have to go pick him up. I can leave the files and we can Zoom tonight." I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the hard wood. I was rambling, panicking. "Sit down," Samuel said gently. I have to catch the subway. It's 40 minutes to his school." "Claire, stop." He picked up his desk phone. "Sarah, have my car brought to the front now." He hung up and looked at me. My driver will take you. It will cut the trip to 15 minutes. I stared at him, utterly paralyzed by the unexpected kindness. I can't ask you to do that. You didn't ask. I offered. He gathered the schematics and put them back into my portfolio, handing it to me. Go get your boy. The meeting is over, Samuel said smoothly. Family first, Claire. Always. We'll review this tomorrow. I took the portfolio, my throat thick. Thank you. The next day, I expected a reprimand. Instead, when I arrived at my office, there was a small, unassuming package on my desk. Inside was a wooden dinosaur puzzle and a note on heavy cream-colored paper. Hope the fever broke. S.P. I traced the sharp, angled handwriting with my thumb. It was a dangerous thing, feeling seen by a man like Samuel Pierce. It was a luxury I couldn't afford. Wealthy men collected things, cars, companies, sometimes people, but they rarely kept them. I shoved the note into my bag and got back to work. The summit began that Friday. It was hosted at a sprawling estate outside the city. The pressure was immense. I was everywhere at once. In the kitchen arguing with the sous chef. In the ballroom adjusting the lighting. At the front gates coordinating security. Samuel caught me in the hallway, late on the second night. The guests had retired to the lounge. The air was quiet. You haven't eaten, he said, stepping out of the shadows. He had a habit of doing that, moving silently for a man of his size. I paused, pressing my fingers to my temples. I'll grab something from the kitchen later. He held out a small plate. Sliced roast beef, cheese, a roll. Eat. Mr. Pierce? Samuel. My name is Samuel. He stepped closer. The scent of him, cedar, clean linen, and something uniquely warm, made my heart skip a painful beat. Why do you push yourself so hard, Claire? I looked at the plate, then at him. The cynicism in me flared as a defense mechanism. Because I don't have a safety net, Samuel. If I drop a plate, I don't just lose a client. I lose my rent. I lose my son's pediatrician copays. I work hard because gravity is a lot stronger when you're standing on the edge. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He just looked at me, his dark eyes absorbing the ugly truth of my reality. You're the strongest woman I've ever met, he said softly. He didn't try to touch me. He just handed me the plate and walked away. I stood in the empty hallway, the plate heavy in my hands, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt a crack in the armor I wore around my chest. The final evening of the summit was an expansion. Samuel had opened the guest list to local politicians, socialites, and rival CEOs. It was a power play, masked as a charity dinner. I wore my one good dress, a modest navy blue sheath dress that I had bought at a consignment shop. It fit perfectly, but it lacked the designer label and the dangerous cut of the gowns sweeping across the ballroom floor. I was standing near the terrace doors, a clipboard against my chest, scanning the perimeter. The night was going flawlessly. Then I saw her, Victoria Kensington. She walked in on the arm of a state senator. Victoria was a woman made entirely of sharp edges and old money. We had history. Before my ex-husband David failed at everything, he used to run in her social circle. Victoria had always hated me. I was the working-class girl who had trapped David, at least according to her narrative. I turned my back, hoping to blend into the shadows of the drapery. Well, if it isn't the help. I squeezed my eyes shut for a fraction of a second, fortifying myself before turning around with a polite, vacant smile. Hello, Victoria. Can I help you find your table? Victoria looked me up and down, her lips curling into a sneer that didn't reach her surgically tightened eyes. She held a flute of champagne, tilting it lazily. I heard you were fetching coffee for catering companies now, she purred, her voice carrying just enough volume to attract the attention of the surrounding guests. A small cluster of women in diamonds turned to watch the blood sport. David is doing so much better, by the way. He really found himself after he dropped the dead weight. My grip on the clipboard tightened until my knuckles turned white. Breathe, I told myself. She wants a reaction. Don't give it to her. I'm glad to hear David as well, I said evenly. Table 12 is right this way. Victoria let out a short, mean laugh. She turned to her friends, not lowering her voice at all. Can you believe David actually married that? A total tragedy. She was reasonably pretty before the kid ruined her body and her bank account. Look at her now. Victoria took a sip of her champagne, her eyes locking onto mine with pure venom. She's just used goods, carrying around another man's mistake. The silence that fell over our corner of the ballroom was absolute. The air felt sucked out of the room. I stood frozen, the words hitting me like physical blows. It wasn't the insult to me that paralyzed me. It was calling Finn a mistake. A hot, stinging pressure built behind my eyes. I felt small. I felt dirty. I felt exactly like the tired, broke, invisible woman they all thought I was. Apologized to her. The voice cut through the silence like a steel blade. It was low, perfectly calm, and vibrating with a lethal kind of rage. The crowd parted instantly. Samuel Pierce stepped into the circle. The ambient chatter of the entire ballroom seemed to die away as people noticed the shift in the host's demeanor. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring down Victoria. Victoria blinked, her sneer faltering, replaced by an artificial, panicky smile. Samuel, darling, I was just catching up with an old... I said apologize to her, Samuel repeated, stepping closer. The sheer physical presence of the man was overwhelming. He looked like a wolf that had just wandered into a poodle show. Samuel, please, it's just a joke, Victoria stammered, looking around for backup. Her senator date had conveniently backed away, wanting no part of Samuel Pierce's wrath. She's just the event planner. She, Samuel said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register, is the woman responsible for this entire evening. She possesses more intelligence, grace, and resilience in her left hand than you will ever acquire in a lifetime of cashing trust fund checks. Victoria's face went completely pale. The surrounding crowd stood in stunned, breathless silence. Samuel didn't yell. He didn't have to. You are no longer welcome here, Victoria, or at any event associated with Pierce Logistics. Security will show you to your car. He didn't wait for her to leave. He turned his back on her, dismissing her entirely. He stepped toward me. I was still frozen, my chest heaving, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. I hated being a spectacle. I hated being defended. I just wanted to sink into the floor. Samuel stopped in front of me. The cold fury in his eyes vanished the moment he looked at my face. He saw the humiliation. He saw the exhaustion. Slowly, deliberately, in front of the senators, the CEOs, the socialites, and the gaping waiters, Samuel reached out. He took my shaking right hand. He didn't pull me into a forced, dramatic embrace. He didn't claim me like a prize. He simply raised my hand to his lips. He pressed a warm, lingering kiss against my knuckles, right over the faint scar I'd gotten from burning myself on Finn's baby bottle years ago. He lowered my hand, but didn't let it go. He turned his head slightly, his voice projecting just enough so the remaining vultures could hear every single word. You call her used goods, Samuel said, his voice entirely steady. You are fools. Look at her. He looked back into my eyes, and the absolute certainty I saw there made my breath catch. She's a mother. She's a survivor. She is everything real in a room full of ghosts. He stepped closer, his thumb tracing the back of my hand. "She's my whole world." The silence in the ballroom didn't break. It shattered. A low, frantic murmuring swept through the crowd like a lit match dropped on dry grass. I didn't swoon. I didn't melt into his arms. I panicked. My survival for the last 4 years had depended entirely on my ability to remain unnoticed. Being invisible was my armor. Samuel had just stripped it away in front of the most powerful people in the city, painting a massive target on my back. I pulled my hand out of his grip. The loss of his warmth felt like a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure. "Don't," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Please, just don't." I turned and walked away. I kept my spine straight and my pace even, refusing to let them see me run. I pushed through the heavy swinging doors into the catering kitchen, the noise of the ballroom snapping shut behind me. The kitchen was a madhouse of clattering pans, shouting chefs, and the sharp smell of roasted garlic and industrial degreaser. I bypassed it all, slipping out the back service exit into the cool, damp alleyway. I leaned against the brick wall, pressing the palms of my hands against my eyes. I couldn't breathe. The air felt too thick. He had called me his whole world. It was a line out of a movie, a piece of theatrical fiction meant to humiliate Victoria. But I was the one who was going to pay for it. The wealthy loved a scandal, but they despised the subjects of them. I was no longer the efficient event coordinator. I was the billionaires' charity case, the used goods he was playing savior to. 10 minutes later, the heavy metal door clicked open. Samuel stepped into the alley. He had taken off his tuxedo jacket. His bow tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck. The harsh yellow glow of the security light cast long, sharp shadows across his face. "Claire, you shouldn't have done that," I said to the brick wall. I wrapped my arms around myself. The night air was biting through my thin dress. "She insulted you," he said. His voice was calm, utterly devoid of the rage he had aimed at Victoria. "She insulted your son. I will not stand by and let that happen in a room I paid for. I don't need a knight in shining armor, Samuel. I need a paycheck." I finally turned to look at him. My eyes burned. "Do you have any idea what you just did? By tomorrow morning, every high-end client in this city will think I slept my way into this contract. Richard will fire me to save face with the country club set. You get to wake up in a penthouse and be called romantic. I get to wake up in a 2-bedroom walk-up and figure out how to buy groceries." He stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away. He didn't try to close the distance. He respected the invisible boundary I had drawn. "I didn't think," he admitted. The confession hung in the air, heavy and rare. Men like Samuel Pierce never admitted fault. "I saw her looking at you like you were dirt, and I wanted to break her. I am sorry for the position I put you in. But I am not sorry for what I said." "It was a lie," I snapped, defensive and exhausted. "I am not your whole world. You don't even know me." "I know you," he said quietly. "I know you check the perimeter every 20 minutes. I know you remember the dietary restrictions of 100 guests without looking at your clipboard. I know you bite the inside of your cheek when you're angry. And I know you love your son enough to endure daily humiliations just to keep him safe." He put his hands in his pockets. "I know enough, Claire. The rest, I intend to learn." I shook my head, stepping backward toward the door. "This isn't a fairy tale. I have to go finish the strike. The rental company needs the linens by 2 a.m. I went back inside. He let me go. The crash came the next morning. I woke up to the sound of the radiator clanking and Finn coughing in the next room. My alarm clock flashed 6 a.m. I felt like I had been run over by a concrete truck. I dragged myself out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cheap linoleum floor of the kitchen. I poured a bowl of generic cereal, added the last splash of milk, and brought it to Finn. He was sitting on his bed, his blonde hair sticking up in all directions, deeply engaged in a battle between a plastic T-Rex and a Stegosaurus. "Eat up, buddy," I said, kissing his forehead. No fever. Thank God. By 9 a.m., I was walking into the agency office. The atmosphere was immediately toxic. Receptionists whispered as I passed. The junior planners looked away. Richard was waiting for me in my cubicle. He was leaning against my desk, a smug, greasy smile plastered across his face. "Well, well, if it isn't the Cinderella of the shipping industry," Richard sneered. "I have to hand it to you, Claire. I thought you were just a tired mom. I didn't realize you had it in you to bag a billionaire." My stomach turned. "I didn't bag anyone, Richard. I ran the event flawlessly." "Oh, I'm sure you did." He chuckled, a wet, ugly sound. "Listen, Pierce's office just called. They want to put us on retainer for all corporate events, $3 million a year, and they specifically requested you." He leaned in, his cologne thick and suffocating. "You play nice with him, keep his bed warm, and I'll give you a 5% bump in your salary." I stared at him. The sheer, unadulterated disrespect washed over me, cold and clear. 4 years of swallowing my pride. 4 years of letting men like Richard dictate my worth because I was terrified of falling. But I had survived the worst already. I had rebuilt a life from scratch. I wasn't falling anymore. I was standing. "No," I said. Richard frowned. "No what?" "No, I won't accept a 5% bump. And no, I won't be managing the Pierce account for you." I picked up the small framed photo of Finn from my desk. I grabbed my favorite pens and tossed them into my tote bag. "I quit, Richard." He laughed, a sharp barking sound of disbelief. "You can't quit. You have nothing. You'll be begging for your job back by Tuesday." "I'd rather clean toilets than make another dime for you," I said, my voice dead level. "Send my final check in the mail." I walked out. I didn't look back. The terror didn't hit until I was sitting on a park bench 3 blocks away, clutching my tote bag. I had $400 in savings. I had rent due in 2 weeks. I had just torpedoed my only source of income based on pride. My phone buzzed in my bag. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I pulled it out. It was an unknown number. "I heard you resigned, SP." I stared at the screen. Of course he knew. "I am not a charity case," I typed back, my thumbs hitting the screen hard. The reply came 30 seconds later. "I know. Open your front door." I bolted upright. I wasn't home, but I lived only 10 minutes from the park. I practically ran the distance, my lungs burning by the time I took the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment. Samuel was leaning against the peeling paint of my doorframe. He was wearing dark jeans, heavy leather boots, and a gray sweater. No security detail, no driver. He held a brown paper bag from a local bakery that smelled intensely of butter and sugar. "You're stalking me," I breathed, trying to catch my breath. "I'm checking on an investment," he corrected smoothly. He held up the bag. "I brought croissants and a business proposition. Can I come in?" I unlocked the door and let him into my life. The apartment was small. The couch was a faded brown corduroy thrift store find, covered in stray Lego blocks. The kitchen counter doubled as my home office. It was clean, but it was undeniably the home of someone living paycheck to paycheck. Samuel didn't judge it. He didn't look around with the thinly veiled pity I had seen from social workers and former friends. He just walked into the kitchen and set the bakery bag on the small, scratched dining table. Finn came running out of his bedroom, freezing, when he saw a massive stranger in our kitchen. He clutched his T-Rex to his chest, his blue eyes wide. Samuel knelt down immediately. He didn't tower over him. He made himself smaller. "Hello," Samuel said, his voice dropping into a gentle rumble. "I'm Samuel. What kind of dinosaur's that? Finn blinked. Tyrannosaurus Rex. He's a carnivore. Excellent, Samuel said. I work with a lot of carnivores, mostly in boardrooms. T-Rex is much cooler. Finn offered a tiny, hesitant smile. Do you like puzzles? I am exceptionally good at puzzles, Samuel replied deadpan. Okay, you can sit on the rug. Finn pointed to the worn carpet in the living room. I watched, utterly paralyzed, as the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar logistics empire sat cross-legged on my cheap rug, helping my 5-year-old assemble a cardboard triceratops. He didn't look out of place. He looked grounded, like gravity finally had a hold on him. After 30 minutes, Finn was engrossed in his toys, and Samuel joined me at the tiny kitchen table. I handed him a mug of cheap drip coffee. It's not espresso, I warned. I drank instant coffee out of a plastic thermos for 10 years on cargo docks, he said, taking a sip. This is perfect. He set the mug down and looked at me. The intensity in his dark eyes was undiluted. Richard offered me the account, I said quietly, wrapping my hands around my own mug to hide their shaking. He implied I should sleep with you to keep it. A muscle in Samuel's jaw flexed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I will bankrupt him by Friday. No. I shook my head firmly. I don't want you fighting my battles. I don't want to be a weapon you use against people you don't like. And I don't want your money, Samuel. What do you want, Claire? I want to build my own firm, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I have the contacts. I know the vendors. I never had the capital or the time. But I won't let Richard own my labor anymore. Samuel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek silver pen. He slid it across the table toward me. Then build it, he said. I am pulling the Pierce Logistics account from Richard's agency today. I need an independent contractor to handle our domestic events. The retainer is $2 million a year. Standard corporate rates. No charity, no favors. You deliver exactly what you did for the summit, and you get paid for it. I stared at the pen. You're offering me your entire corporate account. I'm offering my business to the best coordinator in the state, he corrected. What you do with it is up to you. He wasn't rescuing me. He was handing me a hammer and telling me to build my own house. And us? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What is this? Samuel leaned forward, resting his scarred hands on the table. I built an empire because I had to. Because poverty is a trap, and I refuse to die in it. I look at you, Claire, and I see the exact same fire. I don't want a trophy. I don't want a woman who wilts when the wind blows. I want a partner who knows what it costs to survive. He reached across the table, his fingers lightly brushing my wrist. Let me take you to dinner. Just dinner. No ballrooms. No politicians. Just us. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at Finn, laughing on the rug. Finally, I looked at Samuel. I picked up the pen. I like Italian food, but I pay for my own pasta. A slow, devastatingly genuine smile spread across his face. Deal! The transition wasn't cinematic. It was gritty, exhausting, and completely real. I spent the next 6 months building Adam's event group from my kitchen table. I filed the LLC paperwork. I negotiated vendor contracts with a ruthlessness that surprised even me. Samuel was my first client, but within 3 months I secured 3 more corporate accounts. I didn't use his name to get them. I used my portfolio. Samuel and I navigated our relationship in the quiet spaces between our chaotic lives. He didn't try to move me into his penthouse. He understood that my small apartment was my sanctuary, the first thing I had ever truly owned. Instead, he spent his weekends there. The billionaire CEO learned how to fix the leaky faucet in my bathroom. He learned that Finn required exactly 3 bedtime stories before he would sleep. He learned how to navigate the narrow aisles of my local grocery store without complaining. One evening in late November, the first snow of the year was falling. Finn was fast asleep. Samuel and I were sitting on the tiny, rusted fire escape outside my bedroom window, wrapped in a heavy wool blanket. The city lights blurred in the snowfall. He had his arm around me, my head resting against his solid chest. I could hear the steady, rhythmic beating of his heart. Victoria Kensington filed for bankruptcy last week, Samuel mentioned casually, his breath curling in the freezing air. I tilted my head up to look at him. Did you have something to do with that? No, he said, though the corner of his mouth twitched. Bad investments. Though I may have declined to bail out her husband's firm when they asked, I rested my chin on his chest. You're ruthless, only when protecting what's mine. He shifted, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. He kissed the top of my head. You asked me once why I did it. At the gala. Why I put a target on your back. I remember. I told you I was angry. That was only half the truth. He looked out at the falling snow, his jaw set. My mother was a waitress. She worked double shifts until her hands bled to keep my brother and me fed. She wore second-hand clothes, and she had a scar on her chin from where my father hit her before he left. I stayed perfectly still, absorbing the weight of his confession. I spent my whole life surrounded by people who inherited their power, Samuel continued, his voice thick with an old, unhealed grief. People who thought money made them superior. When I saw Victoria looking at you, I didn't just see a snob. I saw every person who ever looked right through my mother. He looked down at me, his dark eyes intense and entirely stripped of their corporate armor. You aren't used goods, Claire. You are the foundation. You are the steel that holds everything else up. He reached up, his rough thumb gently tracing the line of my jaw. I said you were my whole world, because in that moment, I realized I had spent my entire life building a kingdom, and I finally found the only person I wanted to share it with. I reached up and placed my hand over his. The cold city air wrapped around us, but I had never felt warmer. The cynicism, the exhaustion, the constant fear of falling. It didn't vanish entirely. Trauma doesn't evaporate, but it softened. It gave way to something solid. I'm not going anywhere, Samuel, I whispered. He leaned down, pressing his lips to mine. It wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss of a romance novel. It was slow, deliberate, and absolute. It was a promise signed in breath and heat. I didn't need a billionaire to save me. I had saved myself. But as the snow continued to fall over the city, blanketing the concrete in a quiet white hush, I realized something important. You don't need to be saved to let someone hold your hand while you walk. We went back inside, locking the cold out. The radiator hissed. The streetlights painted shadows on the wall. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would cost. I knew exactly what I was worth. If Claire's journey from invisible event planner to unstoppable CEO resonated with you, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more grounded, emotional stories about resilience, power, and finding love on your own terms. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that true strength isn't given, it's built. Drop a comment below. What was your favorite moment between Claire and Samuel?